The greatest thing a surgeon in the 19th century could offer his patients was speed. Dr. Robert Liston was one of the foremost, the fastest surgeons that was out there. He amputated a tumor in somewhat of 4 minutes and left the possessor of it carrying the phenomenon around and using a wheelbarrow. But just absolutely hell-bent on breaking his own record, he tried to amputate somebody's leg inside of 2.5 minutes. Instead, he amputated his patient's testicles and 2 of his assistant fingers, proving that speed does not always pay. Roll the credits!
Mind, body, soul. Mind, body, soul. Let the music roll. Feel the rhythm grow. Mind, body, soul. Mind, body, soul. Let the music roll. Feel the rhythm grow. Mind, body, soul.
Well, howdy there, friends. I hope you're doing great today, wherever you are in the world. It is a beautiful, hot, sunny day here in the studio in sunny Scotland. It is probably the last of our sunny weather, so we're enjoying it, and I'm here in this clobber in a studio. So you can imagine how much fun it is. But the show we've got today is really, really important that we share it with you and we talk about you and we talk about it with you, because we are going to be hitting some real hard-hitting topics that are going on in our world in 2024 as we live. I am your lovable host, John Morris, the artist, author, psychologist and training, mental health mentor, coach for the creative mind, and all the stuff in between. But that's not important. What's really important today is something that Russell Brand was talking about recently. This past week, Russell Brand released a video talking about the legendary comedian Rowan Atkinson and what he had to say on the freedom of speech. And this kind of got me thinking, first of all, that I'm going to share this video with you about what Rowan Atkinson had to say, but also, are we losing our free speech worldwide? Take a look at this short clip and let me know what you think.
My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth, and the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so. Personally, I suspect highly unlikely to be arrested for whatever laws exist to contain free expression because of the undoubtedly privileged position that is afforded to those of a high public profile. So my concerns are less for myself and more for those more vulnerable because of their lower profile. Like the man arrested in Oxford for calling a police horse gay, or the teenager arrested for calling the Church of Scientology a cult, or the cafe owner arrested for displaying passages from the Bible on a TV screen. When I heard of some of these more ludicrous offences and charges, I remembered that I had been here before in a fictional context. I once did a show called Not the 9 O'Clock News some years ago, and we did a sketch where Griff Rhys-Jones played Constable Savage, a manifestly racist police officer to whom I, as his station commander, is giving a dressing down for arresting a black man on a whole string of ridiculous, trumped up and ludicrous charges. The charges for which Constable Savage arrested Mr. Winston Kadogo of 55 Mercer Road were these: walking on the cracks in the pavement, walking in a loud shirt in a built-up area during the hours of darkness, and one of my favourites, walking around all over the place. He was also arrested for urinating in a public convenience and looking at me in a funny way. Who would have thought that we would end up with a law that would allow life to imitate art so exactly? I read somewhere a defender of the status quo claiming that the fact that the gay horse case was dropped after the arrested man refused to pay the fine, and that the Scientology case was also dropped at some point during the court process, was proof that the law was working well, ignoring the fact that the only reason these cases were dropped was because of the publicity that they had attracted. The police sensed that ridicule was just around the corner and withdrew their actions. But what about the thousands of other cases that did not enjoy the oxygen of publicity, that weren't quite ludicrous enough to attract media attention? Even for those actions that were withdrawn, people were arrested, questioned, taken to court, and then released. You know, that isn't a law working properly. That is censoriousness of the most intimidating kind, guaranteed to have, as Lord Deer says, a chilling effect on free expression and free protest. Parliament's Joint Committee on Human Rights summarised, as you may know, this whole issue very well by saying, while arresting a protester for using threatening or abusive speech may, depending on the circumstances, be a proportionate response, we do not think that language or behaviour that is merely insulting should ever be criminalised in this way. The clear problem with the outlawing of insult is that too many things can be interpreted as such. Criticism is easily construed as insult by certain parties. Ridicule easily construed as insult. Sarcasm, unfavourable comparison, merely stating an alternative point of view to the orthodoxy can be interpreted as insult. And because so many things can be interpreted as insult, it is hardly surprising that so many things have been, as the examples I talked about earlier show. Although the law under discussion has been on the statute book for over 25 years, it is indicative of a culture that has taken hold of the programs of successive governments, that with the reasonable and well-intentioned ambition to contain obnoxious elements in society, has created a society of an extraordinarily authoritarian and controlling nature. That is what you might call the new intolerance, a new but intense desire to gag uncomfortable voices of dissent. I am not intolerant, say many people, say many softly spoken, highly educated, liberal-minded people. I'm only intolerant of intolerance. And people tend to nod sagely and say, oh yes, wise words, wise words. And yet if you think about this supposedly inarguable statement for longer than 5 seconds, you realize that all it is advocating is the replacement of one kind of intolerance with another, which to me doesn't represent any kind of progress at all. Underlying prejudices, injustices, or resentments are not addressed by arresting people. They are addressed by the issues being aired, argued, and dealt with, preferably outside the legal process. For me, the best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it. As with childhood diseases, you can better resist those germs to which you have been exposed. We need to build our immunity to taking offence so that we can deal with the issues that perfectly justified criticism can raise. Our priority should be to deal.
So Rowan makes a really interesting point here, and he does go on to talk about a lot of different things as the lecture that he's given, or the talk that he's given dictates. But one of the things that I really found about this, here in the UK, we are living in what I would say almost like a new society, or a developed society, where before you had white people. Okay, in the 1800s, the majority of people here was white, and even if they were Jewish, they came over and they were, a little bit different color, but they were Jewish, but it was still predominantly white. The Irish was white, the Polish was white, and then sort of around the end of the Second World War, people from Ghana started to come in, people from Pakistan started to come in, people from India in the 70s started to come in, and was rebuilding. And the white British person, the white, sort of, the British Empire, rule Britannia, that kind of person, was very much, still predominantly there, but they adjusted, and with all these things going on, there wasn't peace, there wasn't, civility, there wasn't just this calm, relaxed nature about one another. What you actually ended up having was mass riots, mass fighting. You would have pubs and one night boarding houses that literally had the words "no blacks, no gays, no Irish, no dogs, no children" on their thing. They were very, very specific. They were discriminating against these people and saying, no, this is my boarding house, this is what I'm going to do. Now, obviously, the law has changed, and if you have a boarding house or a business or something, the law now dictates that if you are a public company, you have to employ under the Ethical Equal Employment Act, which means that anybody can literally come and obviously work for you. Where this has gone now, which is really, really interesting, as of 2016, 2017, 2018, I forget the exact date, is it's gone to a point now where we've got the Pride Festival, and that's a whole, again, if you're going by the Bible, Pride comes before the fall, and there's a lot of questionable things about this. But when you look down the streets, not only now have you got a very mixed society that has changed the landscape of Britain completely and the landscape of a lot of Western countries, but now you have men that are dressing like drag queens and in heavy set makeup. You're having men that's dressed with massive beards claiming that they're a woman. Again, when we call this usual or normal, what I mean by this from a psychological point of view is the usual pattern of behavior. That is what normal means. It means the usual pattern of behavior. So normal behavior is behavior where, a man is a man, he's got a penis. He changes in the men's dressing rooms. He doesn't change and goes in the men's toilets. He doesn't infiltrate into the women's. But when we're talking about free expression, what this kind of led me down to thinking was, where does that end? Because obviously when we're talking about free expression, we're talking about expression of term, expression of verbiage, as Rowan was doing, and calling a horse gay, is highly hilarious in my mind. But now we are living in a world, certainly here in the UK and in the United States and in Canada, where you can get a lot of trouble for opening your mouth. By being on air right now, I could get in a lot of trouble, as I've seen in the past, for speaking very openly and very honestly about my views that are the majority factually based, not opinion based. And that's something we're going to talk about later on in the show when we get to the controversial topic right in the end. Is all about people taking opinion as if it's fact. And it's really important not to do that. If you're going to base your opinion, you have to base it on something. And what I've seen here is, again, a lot of people that get offended by everything. And as Rowan said, you can become offended by absolutely anything and everything. If I tell you can be offended the fact that I've got long hair and I'm dressed like this, you will be offended. You'll find something to be offended by. You'll find offense in somebody speaking in a more linguistic way than you, better spoken than you. You'll find some offense, in the fact that somebody, earns more money than you or behaves in a certain way. And the problem with all of that is, you have to look in yourself. What is it that offends me about somebody else? And stop blaming the other person and saying, well, that person's dressed like a drag queen, so that offends me. It doesn't offend me as such, but it does make me look and say, hang on a second. From a psychological point of view, it's what we call enabling and furthering the delusion that a man can be a woman or a woman can be a man. Now, you've got a lot of high-paid scientists out there that will say, absolutely, yes, come on, Mr. So-and-so, you can be a woman, rubbing their hands and again, getting their hands on your money. Now, again, we've talked about this in other shows, the fact that, it costs well in excess of £20,000, $30,000, whatever it is in Canadian, about $45,000, to have your breasts removed if you are female and you are going to be a male. And so I think where it comes down to for me is where is the line? You know, with free expression, what does that mean? Are we just talking about verbiage, or are we talking about, you know, how we expect other people to dress in society? Because as I said in last week's show, I said in the preceding shows as well, I think what it's come down to now is really asking the question, what is important here? We are going to get to comments and questions momentarily, so don't go away. If you have asked questions and comments, don't go away. I'm not ignoring you. I'm seeing them coming in. But literally, we're in a place now where I think if the behavior that you're exhibiting doesn't further human beings and doesn't further mankind and society as it should be, and by that I mean that people are having children, that they're growing, that they are genuinely taking care of their mind, body, and soul, that they're not being exposed to what I call a deluded state, a state of delusion. Now, what does that mean? A state of delusion is a state of fabrication. It is a state of, it's a dream state, essentially. You've heard the phrase that you can be whatever you want to be. Well, you can, but it's not always healthy to be what you want to be. And the big question, of course, is where does it end? You know, so the freedom of expression, I think, is really important. I think when we look at cases like Tommy Morrison, you know, where the media has literally fabricated so many lies about him, and anybody who speaks about Tommy Morrison, you'll probably find that these views go down now, but anybody that speaks about Tommy Morrison, including Jordan Peterson, you know, is penalized, is massively, massively penalized because the media has a agenda that they are pushing forward for whatever reason, and that is that Tommy Morrison was inciting to riot. Tommy Morrison was doing horrible things, and he wasn't. What he was basically doing was saying, we can't cope with all the immigration that is coming on over. And Ohio, recently, I was made aware, actually this week, has had people, immigrants essentially, just dropped straight into their, you know, into their state. And if you're anything like us and your healthcare is already overcrowded and your healthcare is already suffering and the housing is already suffering and you're seeing people struggling and Labour over here has turned around and said, no, we can't afford to you know, give the old age pensioners, the little old dears, we can't afford to give them the winter fuel allowance. We blocked it. You start looking and saying, well, hang on a second. This is what Nigel Farage is very much about. Not that I'm saying, you know, I'm agreeing. I'm just, again, reporting the facts. This is what he's saying. It's like, you need to remember the real issues that are going on here. I know we're getting sidetracked on it, and I better not because I'm on a time schedule today. But literally, it is so important that we don't lose our voice. We don't lose what it is and who it is that we are. And it is really, really important that we still retain freedom of expression and our freedoms, which is that we can say basically and do what we think. Now, people may not agree with us, and that's fine. But if you can at least have a conversation where you're looking at everything from a factual point of view and not just base it in opinion, then you will have some furthering of society and of minds. And that's what people do. Let's jump to the comments, shall we, about this topic. Okay, so, oh, hey, Hannah, hoping you're doing well. So happy to see you, my friend. So happy to see you too. Thank you for jumping on and joining the live as well. I agree. Too many people get offended these days. And I think it's literally come down to the point of view now that, again, if you give people permission and say, yeah, you can be offended, they will do it. It's the same as anything. If you give people the permission to think of the worst things you can think of, probably don't actually, because, you know, anyway, that's the whole other topic. But they will do them. You know, it's as simple as that. People will do some of the most heinous atrocities, and people have done some of the most heinous atrocities because they've been given permission to do them. Just look at World War II, and if you want any more, you know, knowledge about that, I will be free to share some facts with you that I've been learning in our university stuff. Okay, so let's have a look. Epic Wolf 3 is here. We always enjoy Epic Wolf 3. I'm not sure if you watched research on mints, on mice. Sorry. Sorry, yes, they did stimulate the utopia with horrible results. Yes, yeah. That's we're going to cover that actually in another show, because I think that is really, really important, that people are aware of what Epic Wolf 3 is referring to here, is experiments that have gone on in other cultures. So, for example, you know, how mice respond to certain conditioning. how rats respond, how spiders respond, how children respond to certain conditioning and experiments and psychological experiments. And there's a lot that I can say about that. I won't get into that today because that's a whole nother topic. But definitely, if you guys are watching this and you're curious, go and check out the Universe 25 experiment. It's a really interesting thing. There was a comment that was made that it won't upload, for example, but someone had posted, now disappeared, that we shouldn't kid ourselves, and literally we've been enjoying men dressed as women for the past 25 years, referring to Mrs. Doubtfire, referring, I believe, to Jack Sparrow as well. It's the difference with that is Robin Williams and Johnny Depp were never coming forward and saying, hey, I'm really a man, or I'm really a woman. And I believe this. That's, again, I think that's massively taken out of context. And again, we'll see this later on, how important context is as we draw towards the finale. Epic Wolf 3, love the idea that we build immunity. What happened to sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I completely get that. And don't get me wrong, there's, again, fine balance here, because, there are things that people have said in my past that I still remember to this day and how they hurt. And if you're on the receiving end of someone being horrible, it really sucks. But equally, I think it does make you a stronger person. In a world of good, you have to have evil, you have to have bad, because if you don't, it's just the law of opposites. It's the law of attraction kind of thing. You have to have, there are compelling forces either side of it. And speaking of that, we are going to move on to our next point. I'm assuming that we've covered all the points and questions for this particular portion of the show. But cashless societies are becoming a thing, and there are a number of countries around the world that are switching and have switched already directly and singly to cryptocurrency. There is a gentleman by the name of Piers Corbyn, an elderly gentleman, who's got a lot to say on this. And check out what he's got to say.
Okay, we're here today from Let the UK Live, Let London Live, and a whole lot of other groups in Aldi Shop and Go, Greenwich, where they are insisting on nobody can buy anything here unless they download an app and join a digital currency regime. I've attempted to buy some strawberries and he will not accept cash. These places must be closed down, because if we don't close them down, they'll come all over England and UK and the world, and then we will not be able to have our freedom with cash. So get in touch. Keep cash. Keep cash. Keep cash.
Keep cash.
And resist. Defy. Do not comply.
Thank you.
Do you think he wants a cashless society? Do you get that impression that maybe he's hankering for a cashless society? No, I absolutely don't. He's one of many, many people around the world that is standing up against a cashless society. And the reason being, again, so look at this point of view. We've always had cash. And there's a lot of people that say, yeah, but money's really dirty. Money is really just a filthy, you just don't want to touch it. You want to wash your hands afterwards. The problem with it is, and we've already seen this in the likes of PayPal and the likes of Stripe and the likes of the banks, the thing is, if we have a cashless society, it means you actually forfeit your rights. You actually forfeit your rights of having money, or your possession of having money. That's probably the better way of putting it. You forfeit your control over your own equity, over your own assets, over your own finances and your money. And what I mean by this is, imagine, for example, you have a PayPal wallet. Now, again, PayPal wallets are held on these little devices that we call phones. And literally, you can have somebody hack into your PayPal wallet and clean out your account like that. And it happens. And it has happened. People now are so intelligent, you can do phone transfers by putting your phone on top of another person's phone. And literally, it will transfer all of your information from that person's phone. They will walk out with all of your contacts information, but more importantly, your login details to every single one of your cash apps. That is why I do not advocate for a cashless society. The other thing about it is, how long do you think if they're trying to control people, and by they I mean, you know, sort of the governments, perhaps, you know, the politicians, because let's face it, you know, they've got to have control. I was speaking to actually Epic Wolf 3 about this yesterday, and I'm sure she will chime in probably at some point. That, you know, I know there's a number of people that would love to storm the White House, that would love to storm the president's Ghana and North Korea, and even here in our jolly old England, down at Westminster, there are people that would love to storm the place. But what's going to happen if you storm the place? Well, things are going to become a little bit stricter, a little bit tighter. They're going to have more martial law, maybe. They're going to invoke martial law. And eventually what you end up with is something that resembles the Hunger Games, where you are given an allowance that the government is in control. So don't be naive in thinking, oh, we need to take down the government. It would take a mass global effort to take down every single government in power around the world. And that just is not going to happen. But the question you've got to ask yourself is not how do we get rid of these governments, not how do we do this, but how do we play the game? How do we play their game? How do we make it so as our lives are as essentially comfortable and our neighbors' lives are as comfortable as possible? What can we do to take that little bit more, you know, power? Norman Stanley Fletcher from the TV show Porridge over here in the UK used to have a statement, and I love this statement. He says, you can't screw the system. Foolish to try. But with the occasional little victory, you can sort of take, you know, comfort and refuge in that. And sometimes it is those occasional little victories. You know, you're not going to beat the government. You eventually things will go into a cashless society, but you want to try and eke it out as long as possible to protect yourselves, to protect your families. Because at the end of the day, what about the old folks? What about your parents? What about your grandparents? The majority of them are not dealing with cashless societies. My mother still cannot figure out how to use a computer, and she's in her 60s. Granted, she doesn't really want to know. My father can work the basic stuff and do the basic stuff, and he enjoys his computers and stuff. But once you get into a cashless society, once everything goes from the high street and it all goes online, again, you are more cut off. And that's what I'm saying more and more, folks, is that we are more cut off now than ever before as we stay here in our homes. As I talk to you from a studio, again, I can work with people around the world, and I do from the comfort of my own home here in sunny Scotland. Again, you want to be very, very careful. You want to watch the narrative. You want to watch what's going on. But I think the moment we enter into a cashless society, I think is a really dangerous thing, because the thing that then comes after that is not just, you know, eliminating cash, eliminating pound coins, and just going all crypto. It comes in the form of chips. And you got a chip put in your hand, and then, you know, you're literally paying for things by chips. And some people call it the mark of the beast. Well, as we were looking at a couple of months ago with different teachings, the mark of the beast actually relates to a certain religion. And I'm not going to get into that right now, because it is a whole different topic that I don't want to get sidetracked on. But literally, yeah, there's so much that I can say about this. But it's the main thing is, you know, keeping as much control for yourself as possible, because the governments want to be able to control as much as possible, because we are in a failing society, and the more the society fails, the more the governments are going to want to try and control things. Let's jump to the comments, shall we, about this just before we head to commercial break. Epic Wolf's been busy. Epic Wolf's been busy. Sounds like we're moving towards a one world currency. Yes, that has been a comment that's been made before, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. I know here in the UK, when we were part of Europe, or part of the EU, they wanted everybody to get onto the euro, and the decline in currency, shall we say, the decline in its value was so steep that it almost bankrupted, and in some cases did bankrupt several countries. So we want to be very careful about one world currency. It would make things a lot easier, for sure, if you had a one world currency. But again, you've got to be very, very careful of obviously how that's used. Yeah, absolutely. Look at how Canada treated the truckers. We're closing the bank accounts. This is the whole thing. Whenever there's a narrative that's being reported, I think people have woken up a lot since COVID. And I think people have become more aware since COVID that you can't trust your governments. You really can't trust your governments. You can't trust your governments. You can't trust necessarily the health service and what their narrative is. You cannot trust the media, in any way, shape, or form, which is why you've got more people and why it's so important to have more people like myself, like Jordan Peterson, like Ben Shapiro, like Stephen Fry, all coming forward and speaking about these issues, so you actually have real, up-to-date, factually based information that is given rather than just someone spouting their opinions and their views. Again, we're going to talk about that in the second half of the show, because with this controversial topic, it has become something where there's so much misinformation around there, like so many things, that it has literally just confused people left, right, and center. Final thing before we jump to commercial. China uses surveillance to determine if people should be penalized, who they hang out with, what they buy, where they stay, or what they say. Sorry. Yes, absolutely, 100% correct. And that is the purpose. That is. So again, this has been mentioned by far more eloquent people than myself. But can you imagine someone like me speaking out, someone like Epic Wolf speaking out, someone like Anna speaking out and saying, this isn't right. This isn't, the narrative that's being reported here and that's being pushed here and being prescribed here. It isn't right. Can you imagine then what would happen to us? That all of a sudden, your wallet is frozen. Access to your wallet is frozen. Access to your funds are frozen. You can't get any food. Your little children at home starving, all because you said something. Oh, well, now you'll get into line pretty quickly. Furthering on that, what I think people need to start looking at doing is becoming self-sufficient, and as self-sufficient as possible. Because if you are depending on others, this is what Ralph Waldo Emerson was talking about in his audiobooks and in his lectures about self-reliance, that when you are relying on other people, you will literally be a slave to them. And he talked about it with regards to faith as well, that when you are, living somebody else's faith, you will literally never experience true encounter with God, because you're always accepting what someone else has said. With that, we're going to jump to commercial break. Stay right where you are. And we will be right back with the second half of the show, and probably the most controversial aspect of it all.
Have you ever wanted to celebrate your fur baby in the best way possible? Something that you can treasure, something that captures the heart and soul of your furry friend? Well, look no further. With paintourpet.com, you have the opportunity to commission an amazing painting from internationally renowned artist John Morris. John has worked with literally hundreds and hundreds of clients from around the world. John's paintings not only have the ability to capture the heart and soul of each and every subject that he paints, but also has the power to evoke an emotional response from all who see his work. Now, if this sounds like the very thing you've been searching for to celebrate your fur baby in the most amazing way possible, then don't delay. Head on over to paintourpet.com today for a free, no obligation quote, and to order your very, very own custom-made, hand-painted masterpiece. That's paintourpet.com. We look forward to hearing from you today.
Okay, folks, we are back. The second half of the Mind, Body, and Soul podcast with John Morris, your lovable host, all the way from sunny Scotland. And this next section comes with a trigger warning, because we're going to be talking about a very, very sensitive topic. But it is a topic that I feel we would be remiss if we didn't revisit and we didn't talk about, as we have done in other shows in previous years. And it is that of abortion, and specifically full-term abortion or late abortion. There is a number of things that have caught my attention this past week. And one of them being, for those of you that missed the special last week, when we were talking about Katie and my difficulty with conceiving and fertility problems and all sorts of things that were going on. One of the things that came to my attention was to research how many couples essentially were waiting to be parents in the UK and in the United States. And what I found actually both shocked me, disgusted me, in some ways traumatized me as well. So this is a friendly warning. If this is a sensitive topic for you, as I'm sure it is for many, then I completely understand if you don't watch the full thing. But if you want to be factually informed as to what's going on in the United States and here in the UK, I think it's important that you know the facts that are going on. And to give you guys some facts, there are currently 2 million couples in the United States alone waiting on the adoption list. One I found the other day as well absolutely staggered me, and this is from the Guttmacher Institute. And it was that the number of abortions, it has decreased, you'll be glad to know, since 1985, but the number of reported abortions as of 2020 was registered at over 1 million. And we're going to jump to various clips because I feel that it's important that we designate a full portion of the show to this and to discuss this. And to give you an idea, a lot of the stuff is happening. We're going to be specifically focusing on the United States, but a lot of the stuff is happening in Colorado. And there's a very good reason for that. Watch this.
Diving deeper into those numbers of women traveling in order to receive an abortion, our digital team has compiled a lot of the data and put them in some easy-to-read infographics up right now on the denverchannel.com, including this one, which shows the 5-year trend. You can see, starting in 2019, a very steep increase of out-of-state women who came here for a procedure, plus 35%. Then it jumps another 21% to 1,500 here in 2021. And then there's this graphic that shows this is how many Colorado women received abortions in 2021. You add that 1,500 to that to get the total. And these are the states where those women are coming from. But as you scroll down, we get to some of these neighboring states, Nebraska, New Mexico, South Dakota, and Texas. Several of these states have so-called trigger laws in place, meaning a basic ban on abortions, which means the trend we saw in that previous graphic could just continue to increase. We have these graphics and even more numbers up right now on several stories up on the denverchannel.com.
So I think it's really important, as any psychologist in training, any mental health professional, any professional full stop, when they're presenting something like this, to look at facts from both sides. Because then you are presenting facts, not just opinions, and that's something that we always pride ourselves, at doing here on this show. So to give you some facts, ages 20 to 24 and then 25 to 29 were the highest sort of category, shall we say, for abortions at 28.9 and 28.1% respectively. And then it goes down, obviously, to 34 and so on and so on. And that's by the CDC, and that's for 2021, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, it's one of the things that it is a very difficult topic to talk about, of course, because we are talking about lives here that are being murdered. There's no other way to put it. Conception is not when life begins necessarily. Your heartbeat begins 6 weeks after conception, which is technically when life begins. You can see that the egg meets and all of a sudden and all, you can go down these different things, but for simplicity, when the heartbeat begins, for me, that's where life begins. And if you're talking spiritually, again, that's a whole nother topic. Please don't inundate me with the whole. I'm trying to keep on topic here, but as I was sitting there, I think it's very, very easy to say, well, we should just ban abortions. They're absolutely horrific. They're terrible and everything else. As a historian, I also have to look at what happened in, Manchester, Birmingham, London, Liverpool in the 1950s, when things like abortion was rife, or sorry, things with abortion was illegal, but happened illegally, and it was rife. And mothers who found themselves in these situations of unwanted pregnancies or as a result of horrific circumstance were self-aborting. Now, if you want the details about that, I can share those with you, but it was nothing nice. It was nothing pleasant, and often came at great risk to the mother. They would also go to illegal abortion apartments. They weren't centers, they were apartments where you had unsterilized equipment that was there. And these women usually would perform an abortion that would and could often kill the potential mother. So I have to be very, very much aware of my words and what I'm saying from that historical point of view as well. That when you make it illegal to have abortions, for lack of a better term, you're doing an injustice and a disservice to the mothers. But the amount of women that are going for abortions, exceeding 1 million, is absolutely unbelievable. Now, people say to me, yeah, but there's all sorts of reasons and also, yeah, okay, so here's some of the reasons. So it could be health risks to the mother. It could be mental health issues. It could be financial instability, timing conflicts, education, career, personal goals, relationship problems, lack of support systems, already have a desired number of children, impact on another children in the family, unplanned pregnancy, mental health concerns, societal pressures or stigmas. There's probably only 3 out of that list that even would qualify for consideration as to why an abortion should be carried out. Simply saying, well, you know, went, had a bit nookie, you know, oh, you know, that's you know, and now you're pregnant and you don't want it. As we talk about, sometimes abstinence is the best way. And you know, just because you're born with genitals and a sex drive does not mean you have to go and have hanky-panky. You know, it doesn't mean you're going to have a bit of nookie. You know, financial instability is a big thing, of course. But to say, you know, timing conflicts, education, etc., etc. Of course, one of the main things, and we're going to pull this up momentarily, is the whole topic about rape. And again, you know, forgive me for using such a word so freely, but here's the crazy thing, that rape only makes up 33,000 women cases, reported cases of reason for abortion. That doesn't excuse the other 900,000 and what, 58. 958,000. 970,000, whatever it is. I'm live on air and I'm not thinking numbers. You know, 900,000 plus. For somebody just to say, you know, that I'm not ready, you know, it was this, it was that, it was the other, I just don't think is an acceptable thing. And the narrative that's being pushed right now, as you're going to see momentarily, even amongst the young, is somewhat disturbing. Have a look.
I'm 12 years old. I attend Buffalo Middle School. I play for varsity volleyball, and I run track. My education is very important to me, and I plan on doing great things in life. If a man decides that I'm an object and does unspeakable and tragic things to me, am I a child supposed to carry and birth another child? Am I to put my body through the physical trauma of pregnancy? Am I to suffer the mental implications? A child who had no say in what was being done with my body. Some here say they are pro-life. What about my life? And does my life not matter to you?
The lady's time has expired.
As we've discussed, yes, these things happen. I'm very much aware these things happen. I'm very much aware as well that in the United States, there's 33,000 women reported cases that have been a result of pregnancy due to rape or domestic abuse. Of course, this girl's life matters. And the other lives matter. But what you need to understand, and I forget the girl's name, but what you need to understand is you've got a lot of people, as we'll see, in the medical professional world that are making a heck of a lot of money out of your misery. And the fact that they will take your money gladly and shimmy you through just the same as someone who's going for gender dysphoria reassignment surgery. They're not bothered about you. You're just a number to them. And the amount of people that are reporting cases where they have been for an abortion and the mental health aftercare, when you're lying there in the middle of the night thinking, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? I've killed a life. I've taken a terminal life. I've murdered. You can dress it up in whatever you want. The Bible doesn't say a whole lot of stuff about abortion. What it does say is it's very much about life. And again, I'm presenting facts here. I'm deliberately trying to take the emotion out of it because I think it is so important to take the emotion out of it. I'm very much aware that children coming along at a time where you financially can't cope, where you can't give them a good life, where you can't take care of them, you can't provide safe housing for them, adoption centers, there's an option. Oh, but I don't want to go through pregnancy. I don't want to go through this. I don't want to go through that. Here's the really sad thing about this. That baby, that life, that spirit, that soul that came through you and that comes through you did not ask for any of this. And yes, you didn't ask, if we're going along the narrative of domestic abuse and rape, you didn't ask to have that happen. I completely appreciate that. I completely appreciate that. And I would love to sit here and say to you, that it was all great and everything. Sometimes shit happens. I'm sorry to be so blunt. As I've spoken about in other things, the way to stop a lot of this happening, the reason I firmly believe that a lot more rapes are happening, a lot more domestic violence is happening, is because look at the stuff that is being put on TV. Look at the stuff that's accessible on the internet. You can literally find rape porn on the internet. You can find bestiality porn on the internet. You can find any measure, any kind of sick perversion you wish on the internet. And guess what? You say that doesn't have an effect on you? Of course it has an effect on you. As you reap what you sow. I don't believe that terminating a baby's life is the answer. And for Kamala Harris and now Taylor Swift, notice, folks, you are being played. Taylor Swift has a massive female audience. What do you think that they would have done? What do you think they would have done? Had she turned around and said, nope, I'm anti-abortion. Anti-abortion. No, we're not having it. What do you think she would have done? What do you think her fans would have done? It is not the fact that we have some form of legalized abortion, some form of practice, some form of something. Because as I've said to you, historically, it has not been handled well. As I've said to you, historically, it has been handled just absolutely dreadfully. And the amount of people that have died as a result of this. So there has to be something in place. But the fact that you've got 1 million mothers that are going and having abortions. And here's the kicker. I spoke to you earlier on, and I said all the way throughout this show that this has been the most controversial topic and so on. The reason being is because the number one reason that people are giving, that females are giving for having abortion, is because they've changed their mind. And that is factual. That is factual. We're going to see something else that I think you need to know about. Because not only are we just talking about abortion here, and we are going to get to the comments momentarily, but I think you need to look at the difference. And this is why I'm picking on this person in particular, because this isn't just a political thing. This is why it's important to do your research and not just buy into opinions.
After birth, abortions are not happening, at least not in the way that Trump described. Full stop.
He's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby.
Being ripped out of the womb at 9 months is just being born. That's when babies are born. I'm gonna have a stroke. Also, a post-birth abortion, that's just straight up murder. That would be infanticide. No state has legalized that. Yes, in very rare, specific circumstances, there are abortions that happen in the later months of pregnancy, past 20 weeks or so. For the most part, those kinds of abortions only happen if there is an extreme risk to the pregnant person or to the fetus. And these procedures are prohibitively expensive, high risk, and there's only a small amount of providers who will do abortions in the 3rd trimester or beyond. No one is or even can walk into the most liberal of abortion clinics past 20 weeks and yeetus their fetus on a whim. It's worth these terms like late-term abortion and after-birth abortion aren't something doctors use. They're not medical terms. They're made up by Republicans to further stigmatize abortion and confuse voters about just how radical their anti-choice policies are. For this and a million other reasons is why this guy can't be making decisions about reproductive health.
Okay, so let's unpack this, shall we? Because again, it is important, and I stress this point, it's important to get factual information, folks. I've got a friend of mine who's a doctor in Texas who may be watching the show, in fact, maybe isn't. But I spoke to at length yesterday about this. And she gave me some very interesting information. One of my best friends, I don't know if she's still on the call or not, but also lives in Colorado and is very, very well informed. This is happening, folks. This is going on. This is going on. How do I know? Well, first of all, I did my research. Second of all, it's been discussed in courts.
Senator Stabenow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Myers, you are here at the invitation of my Democratic colleagues, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. In his opening statement, my good friend Senator Whitehouse said, I want to quote, reproductive justice is economic justice, close quote. Do you agree with that?
I might, as an economist, use the word rights, but yeah, I do agree with that.
Okay. That's not true for the baby, is it?
Well, first of all, I would refer to a fetus, not
yeah,
a baby.
but that's, well, a fetus. I refer to it as a baby. That's not true as for the baby, is it?
The evidence that I presented to you, Senator Kennedy, was evidence about measurable effects on the lives of women, families.
Right, I got that part, but that's not true for the baby, is it?
I'm sorry, I don't really understand.
Well, it's not true. Let me be clear.
Let me back up. As an economist, I measure effects using data. I'm not here to talk about ethics, assignment of personhood. That's not my
Well, but you
role.
said you agreed with the chairman's statement that reproductive justice is economic justice. There is no economic justice for the baby because the baby's dead, right?
I wouldn't refer. I don't really know how to answer your question. I would refer to
was
a
the baby
fetus.
dead or alive?
We're referring to a fetus.
Okay, is the fetus dead or alive after an abortion?
The fetus would be dead after an abortion.
All right. If the mother is healthy and the baby is healthy, do you support abortion up to the moment of birth?
So I think that's a really hard question to answer because that just doesn't happen. You're asking me about something that simply doesn't happen.
Well, it's legal.
I will tell you.
It's legal in Vermont, New Jersey, Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Alaska, and the District of Columbia, and the left wing of the Democratic Party supports abortion up to the moment of birth. So, do you support that or oppose it?
I don't think. Let me say, I'm here to talk about the economics of abortion.
No, you're here as an expert.
And I think you're asking me a
believe.
question as a person, which I'll answer as a person.
Okay, tell me as a person.
I will tell you as a person that I have ambivalence about abortion. I will tell you as a person, I haven't personally had an abortion. And I will also tell you as a person looking at the evidence around me and understanding how complex the decisions are that people face.
Okay.
I'm just simply uncomfortable
I got to move on,
thinking that there's a
Professor, 'cause I don't
simple
think you're
answer that
going to
applies
answer
to
my
everyone.
question.
I trust women and their healthcare
Yeah,
providers.
it's real simple. You either support abortion for a healthy mother and baby up to the moment of birth, or you don't. And I don't think it's a difficult question. How about you, doctor? Do you support, if the mother is healthy and the baby's healthy, do you support abortion up to the moment of birth?
So, Senator, you're using really inflammatory language to talk about a medical procedure, and it's not a simple yes or no. Not to mention, when you make statements like that, you're erasing the grief and the trauma that my patients
You're not
are
going to answer my
through.
question either, are you?
It's not a question that
I
can
think
be answered
I think I
in
know
an
your
appropriate
answer.
way.
I think
Senator.
I know your answer. Mrs. Ford, okay? Let's take a baby at 21 weeks. Hold up, Mike. This is a baby at 21 weeks, okay? The baby can feel pain, right?
Yes.
And the baby's pretty developed, right?
Yes.
And do you know the name of the procedure that the doctor would use to abort that baby at 21 weeks?
I'm not a doctor, but I believe it's a DNR.
It's called dilation and evacuation. Is that right?
As far as I understand, yes.
Yeah. And first, the doctor would dilate the cervix, and then the doctor would take what's called the doctor would call it a Sofer clamp. It's really a pair of pliers with sharp teeth on the end. And without giving the baby any pain medication, the doctor would go through the vagina, through the uterus, and start tearing the baby apart. Is that right?
As far as I understand the procedure.
Yeah, and she might start with the legs and pull them out, and the arms and pull them out, right? And then she might go for the heart or the spine and just pull the baby out piece by piece. Is that right? Without giving the baby pain medication.
That's what I understand the procedure to be.
Okay, but then you got to get the head out. The baby's dead, but maybe not. Maybe it's still in pain, but then you got to get the head out. And even with the cervix dilated, you got to get the head out, which is hard. So then the doctor would go in and use those pliers to crush the baby's head. Is that right?
As far as I understand.
And then she'd pull the head out, the crushed skull out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Senator Kennedy, your time has expired here.
Well, you
and
gave
Senator
the
Stabenow is
others
waiting.
plenty of time, Mr. Chairman.
Just letting you know, your time's expired. You have
Okay.
other senators waiting.
Well, I was waiting when you were letting others. I'm sorry you don't want to hear about what happens.
No, I don't think anybody
in
else
an
is
actual
going- I don't think
abortion,
anybody
but
else
I
is going
thought that
over.
was what we were here to talk about.
No one else has gone over. Some of the witnesses went a little bit long, but on both sides. So
I thought we were here
trying to
about
control them.
protecting mothers and killing babies.
I'm going to turn to Senator Stabenow and Ms.
Well, I'm sorry
Phillips.
you don't
I'm
want to
sorry
hear
that
it.
this had to
Like
take
we've
place
got
in
a
front of
whole
you.
roster here.
My apologies.
So when I was looking up Kennedy's sort of affiliate, he, yes, is liberal, but that is what's happening. How do I know that? Because when I was a youth minister, I confronted the same things over here in the United Kingdom. And I spoke to a lady in the church that oddly enough was running the Sunday school at the time. In fact, not the Sunday school, it was the mothers and toddlers, the creche kind of thing. And she was an abortion specialist. And I spoke to her. It's also known by another name called the silent scream. And it has been since the 70s. And I was blatantly lied to my face, saying, well, they certainly don't do that anymore. Well, quite clearly they do, because this is the same conversation that we're having now. The fact that a lady who's sitting there, and again, of course, you never expect a lot of these people to give you straight answers anyway, because they've got to protect themselves and cover themselves. But the fact that she called it, it's a medical procedure. Doctors are trained to take you just watch Patch Adams, if you don't believe me. Robin Williams' great film, I think from 1996, 99, whenever it was, where he portrays a doctor. And, you're literally taught how to deal with the issue, but not to deal with the human element, not to deal with the person, not to deal with the suffering that comes after the care, not to deal with the mother that's lying there at 3 o'clock in the morning saying to herself, you've just terminated your own child. Not to lie there and think, oh, well, everything's going to be great now. I don't have a baby in my life. Wonderful. Hallelujah. It's all sorted out because of what my husband's love. And then suddenly realized he left you anyway. To terminate a life, in the words of Harry Potter, is one of the most heinous things a person can do. And I appreciate every single situation is different. Every single one of those 1 million that was having abortions as of 2021, 2020, whenever it was, 2020. Every one of those women had a different story to tell. 30,000 of them was a result of rape. That's what's been reported. Others are going to be societal pressures. So if a marriage is happened, or if it's happened outside of marriage and you're particularly, in community, society, whatever else, it's a massive stigma that's there. Financial issues. That's when you look at adoption. That's when you look at fostering. If you've got severe mental health issues, if there's high risks to the mother, those are really the only two reasons that I'm seeing on here. In terms of timing conflicts, relationship problem, lack of support systems, already have a desired number of children, impact on other children in the family. We have to find, if this is going to happen, we have to find a better way. We have to find a better way, because there are people right now that are lining their pockets, that are loving the fact that this is going on. And in our final video today, thank you so much, folks, for sticking with me, by the way. I hope this has been highly informative and beneficial for you, so you know what's going on. But in our final video today, we're going to look at some of the situations that's going on in Colorado.
To tonight's original now, with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on, which, because of this Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe, centers on that news, specifically on late-term abortions. A doctor who runs a clinic in Colorado, which offers those types of procedures, says he expects to see a lot more new patients with today's ruling. Our own Isa Gutierrez was recently at that clinic and also talked with a former patient who turned to the practice when she needed to have a late-term abortion herself.
This layer here is bulletproof, okay?
Nearly half a century ago, Dr. Warren Hearn worked at Colorado's very first abortion clinic. A controversial practice then and now, with the Supreme Court overturning their landmark 1973 decision, Roe v. Wade.
All the windows around here are bulletproof.
2 years later, he founded this place, the Boulder Abortion Clinic, in 1975.
We specialize in taking care of women who have very high-risk situations that can't be seen in other clinics.
He's one of a handful of doctors in the U.S. who perform late-term abortions. Colorado, one of only a few states that does not restrict them. According to CDC data, abortions at or after 21 weeks represent less than 1% of all abortions in the U.S. In 2019, they say more than 4,800 were performed. Last year, a jump in abortion restrictions enacted in 19 states, with conservative legislators arguing life begins at conception. These days, Dr. Hearn says abortion bans like the ones in Texas and Oklahoma restricting abortion after cardiac activity at 6 weeks are making his practice exceptionally busy.
The number of patients we've seen has basically doubled since a year ago. We can't possibly see all the women who want to come here for help. And I need to expand my service.
He says the Supreme Court's decision will push more women to have late-term abortions.
That increases the cost, it increases the complexity, it makes it more difficult, it takes more time, it's more emotional anguish.
Erica Christensen, a former patient of Dr. Hearn, was in her 3rd trimester when she says her doctor explained her baby wasn't swallowing.
There was a genetic muscular condition that would not be conducive to living outside my body.
She says they decided to terminate the pregnancy.
That's when we learned that we couldn't in our state because we had crossed an imaginary line that we didn't even know existed. until that point. We were sort of shocked by that because we were living in New York.
It was 2016, and at the time, state law banned abortions after 24 weeks. She was referred to Dr. Hearn's clinic in Colorado.
It took 2 weeks for us, under the best possible circumstances, to figure out my course of care.
Ultimately, she says she was lucky.
It's poor people, it's young people, it is disabled people, medically complex people like myself. It is people of color. These are the people who are going to be most impacted by these bans. Most people are just not as lucky as I was.
Less than a year after visiting Dr. Hearn, Erica gave birth to a daughter.
My 5-year-old little girl literally would not be here had I not been able to have my abortion. She's everything to us, like she's our whole lives.
Do you think about these laws changing and how they'll impact her potentially one day?
Every day. I think about what life is going to be like for my 5-year-old little girl every day. I hope that by the time she's even thinking about becoming pregnant, I hope things are better. But certainly, I mean, it's really scary times. Like, I'm absolutely terrified for her.
Do you already have plans for the new building?
I'm working on it, yeah. I'm sketching out plans. I'm working with the architects. I want us to be able to see more patients.
Dr. Hearn is turning 84 this month. You're not going to retire?
No, I don't have time for that. I'm bringing other young physicians to help me, and they're very dedicated and very skilled.
Isa Gutierrez is joining us now. Isa, it is such timely reporting, particularly with what we're seeing in Washington today. What stood out most to you as you were talking with people for and against late-term abortions, talking with patients, clinic staff, et cetera?
Sure. Well, Hallie, when we talk about late-term abortions, again, these are patients who are high risk, patients who late in their pregnancies found out from their doctors that they were experiencing medical complications that could put their life or their baby's life at risk. So, Hallie, they are not happy to be in this situation. They're also exhausted, and they're angry that they had to go to these lengths to leave their state, to find the means to leave their states, to come to a place like Dr. Hearn's clinic to get the safe care that they needed. Hallie?
So as we get ready to wrap up the show, we've got a couple of minutes left. As it was reported, I think it needs to be very much, again, appreciated that, Erica's case, the mother in the video, was an exceptional one. It's what we're talking about here. It's exceptional cases. I think what I'm getting from this, and I just ran some numbers while you guys were watching the show, the medical or the medication abortion pill typically costs between $300 and $800. In-clinic abortion can range from about $500 to $3,000, with costs generally higher for later stages of pregnancy. So obviously the doctor is getting a handsome sum, but I think more importantly, the conclusion in some ways that I'm drawing from this is, I think if an abortion is going to be performed, it has to be done as a last resort and not as a modern birth control sort of idea. I think the other thing as well has to be that this thing that affects so many families, mothers, is not used for political leverage and for votes, as it is being used right now, my opinion. I think that's what I'm drawing the conclusion at today. I think for my own self, and it's been really helpful. Thank you so much, as I say, for staying with me for 70 minutes on this video. But I think it's been really helpful for me to be able to draw the conclusion that if it is going to be performed, it has to be as a last resort and not as a replacement for birth control, or because you have already the desired number. It's timing conflicts, relationship problems, all of these different things. I think that's really where I'm settling today. That if it's going to be performed, it should be performed safely. It should be performed by the right people, and packages should be in place for mental health treatment and care afterwards. And I think, quite honestly, it should be done as a last resort and not just as a quick fix, which is what it seems to be, given the statistics, given the reason that a lot of people, a lot of females have reported for having abortions, which is they change their mind. And I think that's really where we end today. I don't think there are any further comments. I think we're all out. We've got another couple of minutes, folks. If you want to chime in anything, any final points of view, any final thoughts, please do. If there's any topics that you want me to cover on future shows, again, please do feel free to get in touch. But I want to thank you all for watching and all that are going to watch in the future. I know this has been a very heavy-hitting topic. We want to also remind you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends, because it could be the very thing they need to hear in their time of struggling. And as always, if you are struggling with mental health issues and you're fighting just to stay focused and everything else, we can help you. Come and visit thejohnmorris.co.uk for mental health help today. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, just click the link below. You're not alone. And want to thank our sponsor today, Paint Our Pet, which of course just happens to be one of my companies. So I'm very much appreciative for them. We have got a late comment that's coming in there. There we go. The issue of abortion certainly is a hard one to navigate, but I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much, Epic Wolf. I really appreciate that. Again, from a moral and spiritual point of view, I would immediately, if I had no factual information, if literally I just dropped down the planet as an alien and someone told me that there was facilities that you could go that would perform, abortions and things, I would look at you as if you were completely demonic, utterly insane, and I just arrived in hell. And that's somewhat how I felt about the doctors performing these surgeries before I sat down and I was listening to this and thinking, if the doctors aren't believers, when they get to hell, they're going to see all those mirages of babies and it's going to be absolute hell on earth for them. Equally, I know that the souls of all those children are waiting with God in heaven. That's kind of where I draw the comfort line. Because again, biblically, it's what's there. And people say, well, why should we believe in the Bible? I said, well, simple. Look at what life's happened when you've tried to get rid of God out of your schools, out of your circumstances, out of your lives, out of your situations and things. And I would have absolutely, getting back to the original point I was making, I would have absolutely said, no, abortions are 100% wrong, should never be performed and everything else. But knowing that they are performed, knowing that there is no blueprint for human beings, especially here in 2024, essentially, I think, like I said, I'm drawing the conclusion right now on the 12th of the 9th, 2024, at 1742, that if they are going to be performed, they have to be performed safely. They have to be as a last resort and not just because you've changed your mind or can't be bothered. Because it's not just about you. That's really what it comes down to. It's not just about you. And I think knowing what mothers went through back in the 1950s here in the UK, in the cities, I wouldn't want to put anyone through that. Because the worst thing to happen would be not for one person to die, but for two. That's kind of the conclusion that I'm drawing at this point right now with the information available to me. But I don't think in any way, shape or form it should be done to get votes for political leverage at all. I 100% don't believe that at all. So folks, if there are no further comments, no further questions, anything that you got on your mind, we'll get ready to wrap up the show. I want to thank you all, of course, for watching as always. Really, really appreciate it. And until next week, take care. God bless. We'll be back with hopefully a little bit of a lighter-hearted topic. But that's what we do. That's what we're here for, is to discuss the topics that few other people are willing to go near and to actually have the information available at the time of recording that at least has some factual basis. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you in the next video.
Mind, body, soul.